Hey folks, Kiltman here, Kiltman at your services. How are you all? I hope we're all doing very, very well. Now, isn't it strange? You wait 100 years for a great brand new score to an old German silent horror movie, and then two come along at once. Two, I tell you. If you've been keeping up with current videos, you'll know that I'm part of the Kickstarter campaign for Christopher Young's outstanding score for Nosferatu, the 1922 absolute bona fide vampire masterpiece from F.W. Murnau. And this is a brand new score that he's done, and I can tell you right now that in less than 24 hours of the Kickstarter campaign going live, it reached over 30% of what it needs. That's done exceptionally well. So hallelujah on that score. Now, as I say, you wait 100 years and another German classic silent horror movie gets a brand new score. And I can talk about the entire score right now. I'm playing it right now. It is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Yes, from 1920. So we're talking 104 years ago. Almost, not quite the dawn of cinema, but the dawn of really experimental cinema, bringing in a whole new sort of art form. He'd had movies before then, but this is before the talkies. You're bringing colour tinting in, which this film did. You're bringing like special effects, with the iris closing in on certain people and characters, and you're bringing in German expressionism. Yes, the film is touted as being the progenitor of German expressionism in movies. To be perfectly honest, there've been so many artistic movements by that stage. You'd had Cubism, you'd had Classicism, Romanticism, Art Nouveau, Art Deco. All this was coming in. Modernism, postmodernism. It was rife with all this kind of stuff. And Expressionism was coming to an end in other art forms and other ways of communicating this style. Sculpture, artistry, paintings, whatever. It was coming to an end, but cinema was still a new baby. So the makers of this movie, which we'll talk about, had a whole new sort of let's bring it into this. So although there are many movies that have elements of German expressionism in them, many movies, this is perhaps the first and last that actually is entirely, built out of that style and format. And it is a great and mysterious movie with many enigmas attached to it. The story itself is unbelievably simplistic on the surface. A hypnotist gets a permit to work in the local fairground, and he's a mesmerizer, but he has a somnambulist. That's someone who's asleep most of the time, if not all the time. And in the case of 23-year-old Césaire, played by the great Conrad Veidt, he of The Man Who Laughs, with that rictus grin carved into his face by thugs who disfigure him with a knife, who became the genesis of the Joker. Well, in that already been filmed, Conrad Veidt plays Césaire. For many years, reading about this movie and watching the movie and reading the subtitles and all that, I thought his name was Caesar. It looks like that, but it's Césaire. Or you could probably put a bit more accent on it, Cesare, something like that. But this mesmerist, Dr. Caligari, uses this black cat-suited somnambulist with blazing eyes and a bit of a fright wig going on to perpetrate murders, to manipulate someone and use them to commit crimes. That was the theme. And he kills a couple of people, and you have the friend of one of the victims and also the fiancé of the girl who's going to become a victim, possibly, manages to fight and investigate who's doing all this, who's behind it all, and uncover this Dr. Caligari. But it's not quite as simple as that, because No one is who they seem to be. And there's a wraparound story as well, wherein the guy who's the hero may actually just be a lunatic inmate of an asylum who's telling his story to another inmate or possibly a visitor. And he's making the whole thing up. It's all his own delusions. And we find again that Dr. Caligari is actually the kindly, benevolent doctor in charge of the institution who's going to try to make this guy sane. Now, as I say, there's lots of consternation and mystery surrounding the movie story itself, the narrative, the style, the characters, what's really happening. Is it a dream? Is it the warped imaginings of a lunatic? Is it real? Well, if that's all mysterious enough, the making of the movie is even more so. Right? And I won't go too far into this because I want to play, well, you're hearing it now, Karl Bartos, the fantastic score by Karl Bartos. Karl Bartos from Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk, one of the most influential of bands, German bands imaginable, who influenced likes of John Carpenter, Maurice Jarre, and many other, Giorgio Moroder. These were pioneers of synthesized electronic sounds, and with so many great, fantastic hits to their credit. Well, he has done the soundtrack to this movie, this new soundtrack, which we're going to discuss. But let's get the whole movie stuff out of the way first. The film was written by two guys whose names I always have forgotten. Czech writer Hans Jonowitz, who was an officer in the German army, and Karl Mayer, who was a guy that tried to get out of the German army. It's the time of the First World War, the Great War, the war to end all wars. That clearly wasn't to be. We've had many more, and who knows, there could be many more to come. But these two formulated a plan that, look, we hate the army, we hate authority. What's his name? Janowitz was an officer, and because he was an educated man and very erudite, so he rapidly went up the ranks and became an officer. And he hated, as the years went by, he hated authority. And despite it that much, he wanted to, I'm going to condemn all this, but I'm going to do it. When I come out of this, I'm going to do it the only way I can. I'm going to make a film, a play, a story. And these two guys did write plays together, but it didn't make enough money really to support themselves. But what's his name? Karl Mayer. Now, this is where things get a bit mysterious. Karl Mayer always said that he had a long, embittered battle with an army psychiatrist. He tried to get out of going to the trenches by pretending that he was insane. So a long battle of wills took place between himself and this army psychiatrist. And he did get out of it, but that formed the basis of what we all know as Catch-22. Only a lunatic could get out of fighting for a lunatic's war. Catch-22, Joseph Heller, is based on this very conundrum, and it's not true. Folks, it isn't true. It's been massively disproved that what happened to Karl Mayer actually had a bad foot. A deformity or an injury in childhood meant he couldn't walk properly, so he was immediately dismissed from the ranks. You're useless. Ta-ra, off you go. Auf Wiedersehen. So all this bogus story just adds to the legend, a battle of wills between a psychiatrist and myself. Who's pretending to be insane? Who's really insane? This is what the crux of Dr. Caligari is really all about. So it's fascinating stuff there. Now, that isn't the only lie that's come out. Everybody involved in the production of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the production designers who do all the expressionist, weird designs, we'll talk about those, and everything about it, the makeup, the style of it, they all have different versions of how this came to be. The director was Robert Veen, and he has a different version of what happened. Now, the thing is, they all wrote memoirs, they all got interviewed, they all said certain things. Some of them massively aggrandized themselves and gave themselves a bigger role to play in the production of what would become a masterpiece. Others distanced themselves from certain parts and condemned others. Oh, I didn't want this. They raped our movie. That's a genuine quote from the two writers. Because there was a framing device. Their idea, the two writers, Meyer and Janowitz, their idea was, right, we've got the mesmerist and the somnambulist who's committing the murders, and it's going to be this sort of revolt and retaliation against an authoritarian tyranny ruling our country. We're going to make a political statement, a very socialist statement about this, and but the film studios and the Fritz Lang, the great Fritz Lang, Metropolis, and Dr. Mabuse, Fritz Lang was involved to be a director at some point, and Fritz Lang himself said, like, I had far more to do with the script development than these guys are telling you. But we don't know if that's true or not. It probably isn't. Everyone is having their slice of the pie, and like, oh, that bit of pie doesn't taste good, so he did that. He made that bit of pie. That's nothing to do with me. So this infighting took place. So the framework, the bookending thing about the guy telling a story to a visitor to the asylum, as we find out, that was a huge bone of contention. The two writers said, we didn't write that. That was thrust upon us, and in fact one of them didn't even want to go to the premiere of the movie because he didn't want to see this ridiculous bookending device. But they uncovered one of the original scripts, well, in fact the original script for the movie, and discovered that there is a bookending device, certainly a framework to it, but it was different from what you get in the finished movie of the hero talking to a visitor in what looks like an exterior sort of courtyard or a park, but then you watch the movie as it transpires, and then you get the bookend of it, and it's him talking to this guy, but you work out, oh, they're in the grounds of an asylum, and our hero is a nutcase, and of course that's how the film sort of ends. But it ends with Dr. Caligari being exposed as, the asylum director being exposed as Dr. Caligari, the guy who's instigated these murders. But no, it doesn't end like that, because he is the benevolent doctor who's looking after this crazy inmate. But as you see in the movie a lot, the camera iris comes in and frames his face in a circle of deviousness. I mean, it leaves you like, well, is he evil? Is he good? What? Oh no! So it's a Pandora's box. It, like some of the sets, the entire film is set based. There's no genuine location work or exteriors. Everything is on a set. And it's all skewed shadows, off-kilter corridors and roads, weird chairs that are about 12 feet tall with someone perched on top of it, all weird angular structures, windows that are offset, doors which are ridiculously triangular. Everything is completely absurd and almost like a Land of Oz type subversion of reality, or even more so, which is the expressionist style that they were going for. But this bookending thing, they were like, no, we didn't write that. But they clearly had a bookending device in mind. So they distanced themselves. You're raping our film, they said, and the director himself, Robert Vine, barely ever gets any sort of mentioning in critical appraisals of the movie, and there are many. I myself wrote a huge essay on this movie. Ooh, we're going way back here. And it was back in the 80s, the late 80s, I was privileged to see, not the 4K, there's a couple of 4K releases of this movie now, all been restored lovingly, fantastically. by the F.W. Murnau Institute. Did a fantastic version of it. But I saw a re-release of it in Manchester, and I was writing for local press and on radio and local radio. So I did a review of that, but I did my homework, and I was only young at the time. And I was like, my God, this is fascinating stuff, but I'm never going to be head around all these names, all these German names that all begin with W, but you can't pronounce it as that. It's got to be a V. You know, for a nation that doesn't pronounce W as W, they pronounce it as a V. You know, what they play it at. You know, wubble views. I need some of this. Cheers, y'all. I know I'm talking in a rambling fashion here, but I'm talking over a lot of the music to try to hope that we don't get blocked by playing this. This is a very brand new release on CD and vinyl, and apparently there's a Blu-ray coming out as well, which is going to have, obviously, you're going to see a live performance of this against the movie. But we'll come on to the music as well, properly. But the film itself, as I say, is a conundrum within an enigma. But I love the backstory. It's so bizarre. One of the writers, the whole thing's based around a fairground and the weirdness and the carnival aspect of, you know, people doing tricks and doing bizarre things, and it's all sweetly, you know, candy floss and hot dogs. Well, that's the modern day version, but you know, but behind them, the makeup and, you know, the acts, there's something sinister going on, isn't it? We always have these movies and stories about fairgrounds and carnivals which are genuinely highly masking something really deviant and subversive taking place. Well, one of the writers, years and years before they got together and wrote this movie, was going to a carnival, a fairground. Even at the outset, this sounds quite sinister. You saw a very pretty young woman. So he followed her, and she walked out of the fairground and she walked, as he's following her, she walked into bushes, big bushes, walked into them and didn't come out. But what did come out was a man, a finely dressed, elegant gentleman who came out and walked away. So the guy, I forget which writer it was. I think it must have been Hans Janowitz, the Czech. And he was, well, obviously I'm not in luck this time. And off he strutted. The next day, he found out that girl had been murdered. Now this is true. This is not made up stuff that these guys put out there as a sort of marketing. And he thought, she was murdered. I must have seen the murderer. So he became fascinated by this, and he went to the girl's funeral, and but he didn't approach the family. He didn't say what he'd seen. He didn't approach the authorities, but he said that the guy that walked out those bushes was at that funeral. Mucho weirdness, and but the culprit was never brought to justice, so there's no conclusion to that. But that idea was in his head. Now, he and Karl Mayer, the other writer, when they got together, they were both in love with one particular woman, an actress whose name I haven't written down, sadly, but they were in love with her. And another fun fair was there, and her idea was, let's go and get our fortune told. So they went to the fortune teller, who said that you're going to come back from the war and survive. Now that's to the officer, the one who actually did go to war and fought in the trenches. But to the girl, you're going to die soon. That's the story they peddled, right? She was an actress, and when they wrote, and she said, look, I want you two guys to write a story together, and they come up with The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So he's come off to war, he survives, he comes back, they write the story. Now, they wanted her to be in the movie, and there is a Jane, played by Lil Dagover, who's the heroine of the piece, and they wanted her to play Jane. but she couldn't do it for various other reasons, so this other actress took over. Now, she did die at the age of 24, I think it was, and there's conflicting reports on this as well. Some say she died, in 1920 when the film came out, but other reports say she died in 1924, but still at a young age. So again, facts are all kind of like they're interwoven, and some are true, some are not so true, and some are complete and utter fabrications. Like this whole bookending device. The writers didn't want it, but yet they did create one, but it was a different one. The director and other people have said, no, this was always part of it, and it's celebrated. It's the perfect device. And the whole thing about the expressionist set design, all these scything shadows and off-kilter roads and rooms and windows and doors, and its whole arch theatricality to it. It's an unreal world populated by very, very grotesque, unreal characters. But the writer said, oh, no, we didn't put that in there. Robert Vine said, no, it was always in there, the director. It was always there. That's what you wrote. That was the whole point of this. No, we didn't do that. And then years afterwards, when the film became celebrated, oh yes, we came up with that idea. There's so much toing and froing and lying and like pies in faces and like blowing raspberries at each other. The film became an unparalleled masterpiece. It got mixed reviews when it first came out, and at its premiere, as we're going to discuss now, silent films weren't silent. There could be an organ player or a pianist or a small ensemble or even a larger orchestra. Now the thing about that is there was never a set score to most of these films. So these films would play, and if it was just one guy playing an organ or whatever, he would interpret the film his own way. So if you saw it in Hamburg, you saw it in Luxembourg, or you saw it wherever, Vienna, the film would have a different soundtrack playing to it, none of which was actually written down and was the official score to that movie. This happened to so many silent movies, because these silent movies were never silent. There was always someone there to provide some sound. Even having Monty Python style with like coconuts, the sound of horses, just adding a sound effect to bring you into what would be a 2D experience. Sound makes it 3D and puts you in there. So you got this. So it weren't unusual. Now you had Giuseppe Becce, or Besset, is credited as being the guy that composed the original score for the premiere of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And he used blocks of sound, and apparently it was tremendous. And it's renowned, except no one's heard it, because he lost the manuscript. Or so the story goes. He lost the manuscript, wouldn't you know it? So, the original score for the premiere, which was in 1920, did I write this down where it was? No, I did not. No, I didn't. Sorry about that. But there's a conundrum here as well, because other people have said that no, he didn't write the score for it. He did just cobble together bits of Bach and Rachmaninoff, and other classical composers, and just patchwork quilted those in. It wasn't a proper original score. Now, there's other people, including Karl Bartos, who said that no, he did. There was a genuine score, and this is how he worked, and this is how it would have sounded. So again, who knows? This whole, back catalogue of weirdness surrounding the production of this movie and then its release is brilliant, because what it does, it creates a life of its own for the movie itself. It lives because of its splendid visuals, its crazy, chaotic, stylistic flourishes. it's the narrative weirdness, and it's truly imaginative experimentation. But it's the backstory which elevates it even more, because you can't pinpoint who came up with this, that, and like who was the original pioneer. Paul Wegener was the pioneer of expressionism in German cinema with Der Golem and the Student of Prague. But again, his films weren't completely expressionistic, whereas Caligari is entirely impressionistic. And it works. It's a mysterious film with a sense of dread and mystery, and its visuals certainly inspired a lot of other people. People like Dario Argento, people like John Carpenter, people like Alfred Hitchcock. Because Césaire, when he's unleashed to commit his murders in his black cat suit and his white face but his frightening piercing eyes, he has a wicked dagger. And in one shadow killing, when he kills our hero's friend, our hero's name is Francis, played by Frederick Fayard, and his friend Alan, whose real name I did not write down. When they go, and this is a mimic of the two writers and the girl that they both loved, right? They have these two characters, Francis and Alan, who love Jane, and they all go to this fun fair, and you've got Dr. Caligari there, who reveals Césaire and like brings him to life in a mesmerising sequence where the camera will zoom in on this. He's standing upright in a coffin, asleep, with his shock wig, black hair, his pale face. And Conrad Veidt was majorly animated when it came to his face and expressions, because silent movies were always like that. You had to be arch and give it loads, be blazing eyes and exaggerate every movement. And he's perfect for this. And the camera will zoom in on him. And he was meant to wake up in like a big fit of like suddenly he can breathe again, and he meant to collapse on the floor. That was in the script. They didn't do that in the finished movie. The camera zooms in, as you would see with James Whale, with Frankenstein, of course, and later on Hammer movies, the zoom in on someone's eyes. Universal and Hammer both used that device extensively and took it from this movie, beyond any shadow of a doubt. But his eyes open, and they're blazing, and they become really feral, sort of demonic, bestial eyes. But what he's compelled to do, like anyone in the crowd, ask him a question. And like, so they ask, am I going to die? Or, yeah, you're going to die. You're going to be dead by dawn. It's mystery. Why would you just come out with that? What have you done to upset him? But Alan will be killed that night. He'll be dead by dawn. And you will see shadow play. And the film is based on shadows, but most of those shadows are literally painted onto the sets and the walls and the floor, which gives a very disorientating effect. But it's brilliant, it's dazzlingly clever, it's very theatrical, but it's also just, it messes with you. You're like, is that their real shadow? Is that? But these painted on things distract you all the time, and they're everywhere. Everything, the trees have like pointed sharp leaves, lampposts lean at this angle, the roads, the cobbled streets sort of spiral up, but they're just painted on. They go up to that sort of that level and are cast there, but it goes up in a big painted backdrop, and you're like, hey, this is all unnatural. But in that kill, he throttles Alan, and like you see it played out in real shadows on a real wall, amidst all this gothic sort of noir-esque. Don't forget, expressionism bled into film noir, like shadows and dancing on shadows. Film noir came from that entirely. And you see suddenly he's throttling him, and then this wicked long dagger comes out, and it's exactly the sort of framing that you would see for Norman Bates and for Michael Myers. Exactly the same. Weirdly enough, in later years, a remake of Dr. Caligari was made, and they approached Robert Bloch to write it. Robert Bloch? Who he? Robert Bloch wrote Psycho. The connections, they're all there. Now, if you watch that remake, it has nothing at all to do with the original movie. In name only, folks. Don't bother with it. It's not very good at all. Cheers, y'all. Shazam! And but the kill's quite brutal. It isn't the first kill, but the first kill you don't see. When Dr. Caligari arrives in this weird town, this weird painted backdrop town of carpets, which are meant to be grass, and like these rickety walls of plywood, which are just painted on. When he arrives there, he wants to get a permit from the town clerk, who sits on this really 10-foot tall bloody stool, and he's up there on it with a lectern writing away, and he's rude as hell to this poor guy. He just wants a permit to put his show on. Of course, he gets a permit in the end, but the first victim will be this guy. I'm pointing up there because he's sitting on this fucking big stool, and he gets stabbed. But you hear about this, so there's murders in the town. So people assume when Alan's killed that, right, it's got to be Shazam, clearly, because he said he'd be dead by dawn. So it's got to be him, clearly. He doesn't want to be a liar now, does he? So they go and investigate. But what Dr. Caligari has, he has a dummy in a coffin. I don't know how it fools anyone, but it's a dummy of Shazam. So Shazam could go off and commit crimes, but if anyone is there, there's a dummy. That's the guy. So he can't be over there. He's here right now. But another guy seeks to use this spate of killings as an excuse to go and kill some elderly woman. I'm not entirely sure what he is, whether he's got a grievance with this woman, whether he's a housebreaker in the first place and just disturbs her. But he's got a big dagger, and but he doesn't kill her. But she screams and awakes the town, and the mob catch him. So he gets captured and flung into jail, and he's like the red herring. So when more stuff happens, well, it can't be him because he's in jail. So it's got to be Sager. It's got to be this somnambulist and that doctor. They're in cahoots. They're doing it. Now, because Jane, the heroine, her fella, who's Francis, the friend of Alan who got knifed up and all that. Well, Francis, I'm getting the names mixed up. Francis and Jane's dad, who's the chief of police, I think, go and investigate, sort of like Holmes and Watson style, and they go to they don't trust, Caligari at all. Who the hell would? He's a menacing looking fella. He's based on a famed German psychiatrist. I mean, I've seen pictures of the two together, but I don't know. That's tenuous as well, to say the least. Like most of the backstory is, and of course the dummy's here, so they can't prove nothing. But later on, for some unknown reason, Jane seems to think her dad's gone missing, so she goes to the fairground and she gets confronted by Dr. Caligari and Sager, and probably makes a few accusations. So Sager is unleashed to go and kill her. And this is the sequence which truly inspired so much of, again, Universal and Hammer, who would use it time and time again. And she's asleep in her bed, and she's at slumber, and it's beautifully filmed as well. Sager comes in through the window, moves the veils across, and comes in his black and his like mime sort of style, his white face with like makeup around his eyes and all that, like blazing, and he comes in and he's going to kill her in the bed. It's Frankenstein coming in to get Frankenstein's monster coming in to get Frankenstein's wife. It's every other Universal Hammer movie ever made in the gothic vein. The villain, vampire, monster, whatever, the mummy will come in through windows and go approach an unwitting victim. But it's done here for the first time. And he comes in, and apparently, women in the audience, you always hear this crap, don't you? Women in the audience were screaming and fainting and swooning. I can believe that would be the case. Although the film in the UK now carries a U certificate. A U certificate? You've got the depictions of people getting stabbed and all that, and frightening imagery. A U certificate? I beg of you, that's wrong. But he gets there, and even though he's a somnambulist, he's permanently asleep, but he's under the thrall of this master manipulator. His eyes are open, he can see her, and he's smitten by her beauty. Oh God, the downfall of every hero and every villain is to be smitten by the heroine. Beauty always bests the beast. And he can't do it. He's got the knife, but he can't do it. But she wakes up and sees him and screams and oh God. Well, obviously screams very silently. But it kind of rouses, and he grabs her and he's trying to throttle her. But no, I need you. So he flings her over his shoulder, and off he goes out the window and up the rooftops. The famous imagery from this movie are him carrying the girl up these hugely angular rooftops, very sort of precarious, but clearly a curtain backdrop of the sky. But it's a beautiful, set of imagery, copied again by Murders in the Rue Morgue, King Kong, Frankenstein, The Ghost of Frankenstein, and oh God, I could list them all. The monster grabs a girl and runs up into the rooftops and all that. There's no getaway there. Naturally, you seek the high ground, but that's never going to work, because if you can't get down from it, you're doomed, aren't you? Just ask King Kong. But he gets up there, and the mob are chasing, and he manages to he drops her, and he manages to get away, but not for long. He collapses of exhaustion and dies. It's weird, isn't it? You want the big finale, and this film denies you that, because that wasn't the format. He didn't have the big climactic battle with the monster where the police would shotgun it to death or whatever, or a stake would be driven through its heart, its head would be lopped off. It weren't like that. And you've got to remember, he's a victim as well. So he collapses and dies of exhaustion. He's been asleep for 23 years. These little somnambulistic antics are going to take their toll. He's not used to it. He hasn't been working out, has he? So Jane has survived and he's dead. But obviously Caligari gets the body back, recovers that. Francis, our hero, he follows Caligari, who's very furtive, and follows him through this expressionistic, painted on, carpeted landscape. You can see when their feet are stepping down on what's meant to be a rocky path up a hill. It's a carpet, and you can see it getting depressed. It doesn't take away from it at all. It only adds to this hugely otherworldly theatricality of the whole thing. It's a land of dreams. It doesn't make any sense. And isn't that the perfect way to bring forth a nightmarish vision? They don't make sense. You can't fathom them out. But it looks great as well. It's very obviously fake, but your brain doesn't mind. That's the beauty of this movie. So he follows him back, gets to the asylum, and calls the cops, and everyone comes in there, and you're like, look, it's this guy. Because now Caligari is Doctor or Professor, I forgot the name now, and he was the director of the asylum. And while he's asleep, they get his journals and his diaries out, and it all transpires that he found out about some 18th century mesmerist called Caligari, who used a somnambulist to enact murders. And this guy was thinking, oh, can that actually happen? Well, I'm going to get myself a somnambulist. And the real Caligari is somnambulist murderer was called Shazar. So he calls his one Shazar as well and sends him out to do killings. That's why, there's no real reason why people are getting off. He just wants to enact these things and try to. Is it true? Can he make a man do things that he in his sleep that he would not do whilst awake? Which of course is the basis of hypnotism. Can you make someone who's hypnotized do something that he wouldn't do while they're totally lucid and coherent and not under anyone's spell? Well, they say he can't. I don't believe that. Voices on the track. Talk about those in a minute. So they uncover this diary and they right, that's him. He's behind it all. And they find the body of Shazar and the dummy that they know. Right, we know what's happened here. We've got him. And the doctor Caligari goes for one of the attendants. He goes for him twice as well. Like it's a mob subdue him. Doctors and servants in the asylum, and they subdue him. And he goes for the same guy twice around the neck. And he goes back again. It's great. But then you get the flip shot ending, and you've got our hero talking to this visitor. The thing we saw at the start of the movie, and you see, the girl walks past, and the girl is Jane, and it's revealed that Francis is actually an inmate of the asylum, and he's talking to this unknown guy. And the one you see this girl here, he says at the start, "I can tell you about her and the story that we went through." So the whole thing is told in flashback because of this book-ending framework device. But that girl is nothing to do with him. She's a nutcase who thinks she's a queen, and Shazar is there, and he's not asleep. He's not a somnambulist. He's just a weak, timid guy who wouldn't say boo to a goose, and he's completely unthreatening, but clearly, got a few screw loose. And he's there as well. And we find out now in this added on ending that Dr. Caligari really is the doctor and director of this asylum who is trying to find a cure for all these people. And he's really a nice guy. But as I said before, that perpetual iris coming in on certain people, it closes in on our doctor, who's revealed to be a good guy. As everyone sort of goes, and they drag off our hero in a straitjacket and launch him into a cell and bring this really bizarre triangular door shut. It's very strange. And then the camera zooms in on Caligari, because he clearly is Caligari, and it's like, An early shot when he arrives at the fairground has him seeing the crowds are going through, everyone's bantering and laughing and coughing and joking and spluttering and pointing and doing all this sort of stuff, and you can hear the hurdy-gurdy going, and there's a little monkey, and you've got cymbals going and all that, and organs are playing, which you can hear right now. And there's a dwarf there as well, in an immaculate suit, and but Caligari, what's his name, Werner Krauss, in a really arch but phantom dun 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 dun. He looks at this dwarf as he walks past. He goes, and like he kind of looks him up and down, just like that. And it's this analytic brain thinking like, I could use you. There's something about you. There's something very sinister about Caligari. And the film is magnificent. As I say, I've reviewed it previously, and I wrote a big essay on the bloody thing. And but I had to learn a lot about the psychiatric bent to it, as well as the art form of it. And it's fascinating to read and to study and then to write about. But when I watch the film now, and I do watch it, I can't lay claim to loving this movie in the terms of I love Phantom of the Opera, Lon Chaney, I love Nosferatu, I love the Golem, I love Carl Dreyer's Vampire, although that's not a silent film. That's one of the first talkies. So I love Metropolis. I love M. I love Dr. Mabuse. I love a lot of The Terror. The original Cat and the Canary, the original John Barrymore, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. These are fantastic movies, all very notable for their style, their flourish, their direction, and their genuine nightmarish qualities. They created the genre that we know and love as the horror genre. But Dr. Caligari has a different feel to it. It's absurdist, it's confusing, it's not as horribly overacted as many silent movies are. It's not like that. It's a lot more naturalistic. And if you watch the 4K restoration of it, there's so much more details on the faces, and you can see their expressions, and it really does change it. If you watched it back a good 20, maybe more years ago, on TV versions and the old DVD and VHS versions, it looked shoddy and ridiculously horrible. You couldn't make out what the hell was going on. It had jitters and judders and frame jumps and damage and speckles aplenty. The full version now is phenomenal. Looks great. The details are amazing. The different tinting, you've got the sepia tinting, obviously. You've got black and white, but you've got you've got a pinkish tint to it as well, and a darker tint. You've got variations, and it looks amazing. And again, I did not write down the name of the cinematographer. I should have done that, because he did a bang up job. It's not, you've only got a couple of sort of tracking shots, but you've got these zooms taking place, and the obviously the iris stuff taking place, which is always fascinating. I think it's overplayed slightly in this movie, because they just discovered it. So, we're going to do this again, and we'll do it again. I'll tell you what, let's do it again. And that's how it goes. But I do recommend the movie. It's of massive historical importance to not only to the genre of horror, but to movies in general, and cinema, innovation, experimentation, and the art form in itself. Horror film, yeah, it has the tropes of a horror film, although it did not know it at the time. They weren't making a horror film. They were doing a film in the style of the Grand Guignol, which was, of course, the French theatrical experience of limb lopping and throats getting cut, heads coming off, just on stage. Gross imagery, Grand Guignol, and look, we're all way used to that with video nasties. You went from Universal to the Independents to Hammer to Amicus to whoever, more independents, George Romero and Sam Raimi, Bill Lustig, the cannibal movies, the zombie movies. You went through all of that. It's kind of turning full circle. We're trying to make more art films these days, which is not a bad thing, I'll be honest. Because everything is cyclic. Everything turns around and around again. And you have expressionism in movies now, because people like to use film noir. So you got a lot of movies try to be sort of, it's a way of cutting costs, Film noir, an offshoot of expressionism, is a way of cutting costs. You have to light up a set. We'll have shadows here. We can't put light there. Also, should be remembered, there's another reason why, a possible reason why they use the painted sets, because there was a power cut while they were making the movie of Dr. Caligari, Cabinet Dr. Caligari. There was a power cut. So, screw it, we'll paint the set design on the set. We'll just paint it. We won't use lights. We can't afford the lights. There's no power. So we'll just paint it. So that there was another reason behind these really abstract and avant-garde set designs, which are genuinely memorable. So truly memorable. They are the Land of Oz mixed with a nightmarish carnival style, and that's perfect. Something wicked this way comes. Oh God, American Horror Story, The Funhouse. So many movies have echoed this down the eras and generations that, you know, Caligari will last forever. And that's why the beauty of these old vintage movies really is eternal, because they broke the mold. There was no mold to begin with. They just created something. We then broke the mold afterwards with different movies and tried different avenues. But everything we took, everything we've got now, did find its place in these old vintage movies, which is why I always bang on about the old classics all the time. Now, Astrodyne, you're a friend of mine, Astrodyne, a traveller in time, sent me this fantastic box set, limited edition box set of the new score for The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And it's released by Bureau B, right? Now, there is vinyl, and there are various versions of this out there. I think I may have said before. The box set, I'm going to show you the box set now. The box set I've got has the CD with the beautiful, beautiful score, which you've been hearing. I'm going to start playing it again. And it's got a fabulous booklet full of really immaculate notes, and also a track by track sort of rundown of what instrumentation was being, you know, electronically modified to be in there, and whether it was voices or a clock ticking or a door slamming or something being dragged across the floor, because you've got all these effects are in there. And because Karl Bartos said, look, I've been fascinated by this movie since, you know, day one. Basically since he was born, I've been fascinated by it. Then he got into the whole musical experimentation sort of field, joined Kraftwerk, had done many, many, many great revolutionary sounds, records and, you know, sound designs, and became, you know, well renowned. And then this opportunity came up. We thought, look, I can do this. I can do a soundtrack to this movie. There's been many soundtracks made to this. I wrote some of them down actually. Well, you had the original Giuseppe Bessi, who I don't know, did he actually do one or not? Karl Bartos says that he did, but I've heard people say like, no, he did. He just used classical music and threw that in there. But we're never going to know because you can't get the manuscript for it now, so there's no proof in the pudding there. Casey Palbicki and Timothy Brock did a great one, which is it's held in quite high esteem. Timothy Brock, that was a great rendition of it. And as I've been talking about with Christopher Young for Nosferatu, when you're scoring a silent movie, you're scoring the entire thing. And because, you know, in a talkie, people are talking, so you may have to give pause to your scoring to let them talk and have it make sense and be more relevant and important and emphatic. And then you might have periods of silence where it's meant to be quiet, it's suspense. But with a silent movie, that's not the case. The silent movie it wasn't built with sound in mind, and yet on this, apparently there were sound effects on stage, on set, to have the cast react to certain things, and to give a bit of ambience and a bit of atmosphere for their performances. So it was used, but the actual silent movies, they didn't have a score. As I said, cinema exhibitions would have someone sitting down the front playing an organ, playing a piano, maybe a string quartet, have something, a monkey with the cymbals, I don't know, just whatever. But there'd be something to add a sound to the movie. Otherwise, you'd be sitting there, belching, farting, people picking their nose and coughing and muttering, you know, and which would detract from a silent movie. So you had to have sound. This is why we know sound is important in telling a story as much as the visuals are. Cheers, y'all. The sound of me slurping whiskey is very important. So, what Karl Bartos did, he went like, look, I'm fascinated by this movie. I love the expressionist movements. I love that style. I love this film. I want to create something. Now, he created, I'll read it out to you. I'll show you the entire box. Well, here's the ring light is on, and it's a predominantly white box. So I'll try and find the right angle for it. There you go. It's a lovely box. And it says, Karl Bartos, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, narrative film music and sound design from Robert Vine's psychological thriller. And on the back you have a lovely track listing, very detailed. The film is in acts, so he's done it in acts. And what he's done, he's followed the film exactly. So he's got the chatter and babble of a crowd of people in an amusement park, a fun fair. He's got an entire track of a clock ticking, which is great. And you've got sounds of things being moved, doors, shouting. You've got all sorts of stuff going on there. And he's used a full symphonic orchestra. But what he's done, he's electronically and synthetically modified all of those sounds, because that's what he does. He's from Kraftwerk, and there was a huge, massive movement again in the 60s and 70s, electronic music, especially throughout Europe, and essentially Germany did this. And he's the forefront of all. He was a pioneer of all this with Kraftwerk. So his rendition of Dr. Caligari is fully orchestral, but it's done electronically, and yet he's got everything in there. The percussion's there, the woodwinds are there, cymbals are there, flutes are there, the hurdy-gurdy is there, the church organ is there, and the electronic organ is there as well. And it's extraordinary. Voices, it's got a hell of a lot. So it's like, there's the box. Now, in my version, and there are several versions of this, mine is number 1083 of, oh, my eyesight's letting me down, 2000. 1083 of 2000. Limited edition, including the DVD, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Now, the DVD, okay, so in this version, so you get, well, that's the little case for the CD, which you've been hearing. What am I doing? Let's play it again. Play it again, Sam. Which he doesn't say, of course. And now, typically, nothing's happening. It's because the whole thing switched off, didn't it? Okay. I'll turn it down slightly. Then you get the DVD of it is in there. Now it's a DVD of the 4K. I know, it won't look as good as it could do, but it's a film from 1920, folks. So get this box set, or if you've got the Blu-ray of Caligari, you could combine the two, if you know what I mean. You can play the soundtrack over the movie. But there's a DVD, and the DVD of it is the 4K restoration, albeit down on DVD level. But it's got Karl's score playing over the top of it, so you can see how it works. And he said, look, I'm going to match everything that you see. I'm also going to use silence as well in certain elements. Now, I've watched half the movie, I know, for this review, but I wanted to talk about this, and I watched half the movie, and it does sync up, it adds. It doesn't sound out there or revolutionary or stupid or, oh God, that's an old film and they put some new music on top. Duh, which can work. Look at Metropolis and the soundtrack of Metropolis now. There's been many for that, of course, but oh my God, it sounds amazing. But you also get a fabulous booklet here. Again, it's in bloody white, which is the ring light. Doesn't he like? There's the great man himself, pondering, working it out. And there's he's written most of this text, and there's a lot of it as well. talking about the movie itself, the plot of the movie, its premiere, and its reception, and how the music has been adapted, and how he created his own score for it. Lots of stuff, and it's a good, meaty booklet. And as I say, there's loads of red credits at the end of it as well. It's very intellectually written. There's nothing wrong with that at all, of course. Oh, and you have at the back of it, it's track by track, and it will say what is happening during that particular track on screen, and in a lot of cases what instruments he's using, Celeste, piccolo, whatever, to bring it to life in his version. But it's shadows dancing is what this is all about. Now this, there's a very John Carpenter-esque feel to this. And as I said, you can't say that Carl's riffing on John Carpenter, because John Carpenter very definitely riffed on Kraftwerk in many cases. I'll let you listen to some of this. Here we go. Here's the fairground stuff. There's quite a bit in the first sort of third, I'd say, of the score. This score, there's a fair bit of the fairground stuff going on. But that's reflecting the movie. It's what Carl's doing. He's following the movie. Oh, and what I like about it as well is it's not like Mickey Mousing to the point of Mickey Mousing is when a composer and their music follows beat by beat what you see on screen. Most effectively you'd see it, although I say Mickey Mouse, but it's Tom and Jerry would be the thing, where every single, do, and, as Tom would be creeping up on Jerry, and every mallet hit, and the lumps coming out of the head would be totally mimicked musically. What he's doing here, it's not so exaggerated. It flows with the movie itself. So people moving around these bizarre, absurdist streets and sets, it makes sense. And he's adding the ambience with the background noise of people chitter-chattering. You heard it before. When we play through this now, you might not hear it because I'm going to skip to certain things. Now I know there's people out there who are going to go like, that's just someone on a Casio keyboard. I know, I hear this crap from people all the time. What you're not getting is the fact that he's took every single instrument from the orchestra and he's modulated it, he's created it synthetically to give it its own new ambience and sound design. He's built upon the orchestral sound, because that's what he loves. The electronic process, he loves to create. It's a different field from the organic sound of the orchestra. It's adding a different level, and if you can pick up on that and love that, and if you love Kraftwerk, you love Tangerine Dream, you love John Carpenter, you love Giorgio Moroder, you love electronica, you will appreciate what he's done here. And it sounds simplistic. Do 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 do. Just like that bit of Casio keyboard noodling. It's from a film from 1920, and it's simplistic, naive pleasure of just walking through. There's a tent, there's a marquee there, there's, what's that? There's a strong man there. That was another idea that he had. The other writer of Caligari said he went to a fun fair and he saw there was a strong man who, under Mesmerics could answer every question the audience could throw at him whilst lifting incredibly heavy weights. Again, it's just a funfair, piece of trickery. It's almost like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, then, isn't it? Do 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 do. But no one ever says, "Oh, John Williams, using your Casio keyboard there when the mothership lands." Do 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 do. No. Oh, I love it. I think it's fantastic. When you get into, we'll move on to these things, the killings and the attack, Sagier on Jane, it's and all the elements. There's far more orchestral elements come in or are embellished. But you do get a hell of a lot of the funfair. So I'm going to move down. And of course, on this particular system I'm using right now, it doesn't give you the actual track names. But if you're expecting like, I'm the operator with a pocket calculator, boop, 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 you're not going to get that here. Or she's no, not a robot. She's a model and she's looking good. She's a model. I think they're Metropolis there, aren't they? As I said, it's not showing me the actual tracks themselves. Let's move down to you've got some various renditions of Caligari's theme which do alter throughout. And that sounds like OMD there. And I saw OMD 2 nights ago in Liverpool Arena, and they brought the house down, as they always do. And again, the likes of OMD were inspired by Kraftwerk. Andy McCluskey, Paul Humphreys, keyboard. One of them little synthy electro guitar things. Drum machine. Off they go. And they're still going. 50 years later. Okay, let's try to get some of the more so there is an entire track where there's a clock ticking and it goes on for like a minute and a half and you're like, but it's mesmeric and like you kind of fall under its spell. A clock, I mean, listen to this, big bass drums. You can probably also hear a magpie in the rafters just there. We have a nest of magpies. We get them every year, and leave them alone. leave magpies alone. You disturb them, they will make your life an absolute hell. They won't forget you, and they will follow you, and they will dive bomb you, and they'll go for your eyes. They'll do it. They'll do it. So we just let them get on with it. So if you can hear that little of the magpies, enjoy it. No, I want to get to 26, I think. There are so many great tracks on this. There's a lot of tracks. The whole thing lasts 75 minutes and 37 seconds, which I do believe is actually longer than the bloody movie itself. But now this is the whole sort of Sager brought into the attack to kill Jane. Although I'm a bit unclear as to why he's instructed him to kill Jane, but end of the day, this is the thing. Why, you think, well, why does that happen? Why that? Why this? Why? Do you know? And doesn't matter. It's all the fever dream of a deluded, institutionalized lunatic. And therein lies the trick. Now, say sound designs and soundscapes. Narrative, film, music, and sound design. That's what it's labelled as. That's what it's titled as. Now, in America, when the film got released initially, way back in the 20s, and there were a lot of sort of bad deals that took place because obviously it was Germany, and certain territories, especially France, didn't want nothing to do with German movies. So it took a fair bit of wheeling dealing to get these movies into certain territories. But in America, what they did, they had a guy that come on stage. So you got the big screen, and you've got like an orchestra or a pianist playing there. And before the film started, you had a guy that come on. Remember, I said that the framework device of the movie is our hero telling the story in flashback to a visitor in a courtyard, which looks like a park, but it's actually the courtyard of the asylum. And he's telling him this story. Well, at the end of it, he's revealed, of course, to be an inmate of the asylum, and we don't know who this stranger is. Well, in America, they brought this guy on before the film started, and he's meant to be the guy that he's talking to. It ain't the same actor. It's just some guy, probably made up to look like him. Say, oh, like, I met this certain person, and he told me this story, and now you will see this unfold before your very eyes. And then he frigged off behind the curtain. But at the end of the movie, he'd come back on again, and this is horrible. This is truly horrible, and destroys everything the movie's all about. Listen to this. It's far more dramatic. And he says, comes onto the stage again, and says to the audience, "Don't worry, folks. Dr. Caligari, not Caligari. It was the real doctor's name from the asylum. He treated him, and he was fine, and got released. He was okay, and lived happily ever after." What? That is not what the film was about at all. It just shows you how people treat movies and stories in very different ways, and different eras demand a different sort of conclusion, different meaning, different denouement. You can't leave audiences in a bad way at certain times. Wartime does this. Wartime, of course, after the First World War, the H certificate for horror was brought in. So a lot of Universal movies were cut and brandished with the H certificate. And then times got more lenient. Pre-H certificate, you had the likes of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, and wow, and the limbs lopped off, and like body parts and brains and things. It still wasn't what we get today, but it's testament to how times change. And in times of war, people don't want to see, horrible things. Now, of course, in Germany and around the rest of the world after the First World War, people are coming back and having their limbs have been blown off, they've been shot through the eye, their faces had undergone reconstruction, and so Frankenstein and that kind of movie really worked at that sort of premium time, because people weren't horrified or revolted by, Boris Karloff in makeup as the mummy or, Frankenstein's monster, because they'd seen people in the streets, war veterans come back, amputees, and with masks on, these masks on their faces to hide facial burns and the fact that a cheek had been blown away and their jawbone was missing. They had these masks on, so people became kind of inured to it, and then we became softened because war veterans were hidden and forgotten about and became, well, literally monsters in society. And I'm afraid that, to a degree, happens to this day. I said before, things turn full circle. Well, things have turned full circle, and we've turned our backs on war veterans, people who've laid their life on the line for policies they don't believe in, but for patriotism, and then the government turns their back upon them. So I'm not going to Shanghai this into a political statement, but most of you guys who watch my videos know exactly how I feel about these things. I'm ex-forces myself. I'm a Royal Marine, and I have every trust, belief, and perseverance in human spirit to go through all of that flack and come back and face a government that's hostile to you, that wants to just forget about you. Yeah, we sent into a war which we shouldn't have been involved in, but we've got our reasons for doing it, which don't involve you. Just go out and be cannon fodder for us, but win at all costs. I know exactly where that's coming from, having worked for the MOD and the government for decades, and the forces for a good chunk of that as well. So, but back to this, horror movies back in that time had that curious pre-H code sort of vogue. They could get away with murder. They just didn't know it. They were just showing what they thought they could get it, but no, they didn't think they were going to offend anyone. Although people might scream in the auditorium, people might faint, but that was part of the thing. That's how horror was born. That's how the horror genre was born. It's horror. You're meant to be horrified and scared by what you're seeing. That's the whole getting point, is it not? And then it got sanitized, and then it came back, and of course Hammer took over, and gore in Kensington gore in Eastman colour, poor man's Technicolor. But wow, they blew the world away. And then George Romero, even in black and white, George Romero with Night of the Living Dead changed the face of cinema again. He did it in black and white because that's what they could afford. And if you look at the movie, it's nowhere near that gory, but you have got scenes of there's bullet hits, and you've got people eating. It's just barbecue chicken, that's all it is. But the impression given was it's cannibalism, and of course that opened the floodgates. The floodgates. And then we went through the whole video nasty. The 70s went volatile, and everything was shown, and it was exceptionally gory and cruel and brutal. Bullets hit, exit wounds. Sam Peckinpah, the Wild Bunch, pioneered that one. And then you went into the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and the video nasties, and people are watching these these horrific movies and they're going out and committing these crimes. Never happened. Not once proved, ever. But in the UK, we banned 70 odd movies, 70, I always forget this, 71 or 77, I don't know what it is. But 70 odd movies were banned. They're basically all of them, almost all of them are out now, fully uncut. There's still a few which won't get uncut releases. So, you know, but by and large, society's changed, and a lot of these certificates, they were hard X's. They weren't H's. I can't do an H. I can't do that. An H. I'm trying to do an H there. What the hell? But we get X certificates. They're all like 15s. No, because they're so tame, thematically and graphically, explicitly. They're tame comparatively because times change, and yet there's still films which don't get a certificate in the UK. There's still movies that don't come out to the UK because no, we're not having that. Or they'll cut films down. It still happens, but by and large, it's kind of anything goes. But back then, you'd have Shazar going into Jane's boudoir, coming through the window, and we can see her sleeping in the foreground, and he's coming through from the background, and it's home invasion. It's the rape nightmare, or just the murderous nightmare, and it works. It's genuinely frightening. Although we as an audience kind of, you know now that he's not to blame. He's as much a victim. But is he? Because in the asylum, he's just an inmate there. Having said that, what's he done? He's just an inmate standing there, you know, in the background. He's not hurting no one, and he's not asleep either. You know, so it's all the fever dream delusions of a psychiatric patient. So again, there's vocals there as well. So Carl works exceptionally well. I'm not sure how long it took him to do this, but it was a lifetime in the creation. And he definitely is smitten with this movie, and I understand why. These films have such a captivating power that it's hard to ignore them. You know, a lot of kids these days, they're going on the Marvel franchise and and DC movies and the A24 movie, which is not a bad idea, but some of them are so crap. But at least they're a bit more artistic, A24 stuff. And but then you got the whole Blumhouse directive, which submerges and swamps everything else, which has been a horrible influence on movies, I think. But you know, people say, like, including myself, cinema these days is nothing but remakes, sequels, requels, sidequels, reboots, reimaginings, remakes. Oh Christ. And it is, but there are so many other movies being made as well which are a bit more experimental, a bit more weird, a bit more avant-garde, but you don't get to hear about them. That's the problem. Whereas back in 1920, this was fucking huge. Apparently the first cinema that showed it, and again, as I said before, there's so many differing accounts of this. The first cinema that showed it at the premiere, they showed it twice, and people like stormed off and complained and said it was crap, and whatever the German way for it's crap. It's KRAPPE, and that at the end of it. crap, and hated it. So, but that's not true, because the film premiered and it got great reviews from some critics, some naff, but great reviews from the audience, and it played for 2 weeks, then broke off, and then played for another 4 weeks. That was, even to this day, that's unusual to do that for a movie. So it did really well, and when it come back for the extra 4 weeks, the production team did a huge, or the distributors did a huge marketing campaign. You know, are you Caligari? Can you be Caligari? Can you? And like, people are going, what the fuck does that mean? But it brought them in and said imagery, you know, and it brought crowds in, and the film appealed to the avant-garde, the artistic elite, because of its expressionist designs and stylistic flourishments, but also to the commercialism of a horror movie, because you'd had horror movies before, It wasn't a known commodity, but people were thrilled by the idea of a fright film. Yeah, it's got something exciting, exhilarating. It's not just telling me something. It's not like propaganda, which of course, you know, Weimar cinema would be nothing but rife with for the next, you know, good few years. I say thematically, people say that it was ushering in a nation waiting for Nazism. I don't know. In hindsight, you can say that, because after, you know, the likes of World War II, Germany was in such right. We've got to make repatriations and all that. Oh shit! Yeah. Well, films like this, they were paving the way for a Nazi, you know, tyrant to take over a subservient nation of people who didn't know what the hell to do with themselves. We'll just throw ourselves into a new campaign. Yeah, okay. It's bullshit. That's revisionist history, writ large. The film is just an avant-garde exploration of the psyche, combined with the narrative thrust of deviance insanity, with twists and turns and revelations, but hugely embellished by the visual style of a nightmare, of a delusional vision. Everything is thwarted and skewed. Everything is different from reality. So there's no way you can take this movie on a literal sense. You can't do it. It doesn't make any sense. So, listen to this though. See, the organ sound is quite nicely prevalent. But Carl's following very closely to what's happening on screen. Now, as I say, I believe that there's going to be a Blu-ray of this coming out. I'm not aware of it being out right now, which I presume will have maybe the movie with the soundtrack on it, or maybe a live screening of people watching the movie with the soundtrack playing, with a live presentation. I don't know. But it definitely works. Well, folks, you know, I think I've what have I done now? I've done an hour and 30 minutes on a film that's a fair bit shorter than that. But it's wonderful. And as I say, you've got like crowd noises, doors, clocks, things moving, crowd ambience, which adds to it. So he hasn't just there's a silent movie, I'm just gonna put music on it. I'm gonna follow what's actually happening on screen, and there's people there, I'm gonna bring them in. Oh, there's a door shut now. I'm gonna embellish that a little bit. I think the big bass drums, bum, 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 bum. And it's all brought into his system, and he plays it out there. And he's used one of his many old associates to help produce this as well. So Kraftwerk they're definitely involved in this. Oh, Matthias. Well, folks, I have been Always Shall Be Kiltman. Please, in the meantime, and as ever, let's explore old silent movies which are silent no more in between time. Please keep it Celtic, keep it Celtic. And I'm going to see you all That's my own sound design. Listen to this. Now, to me, that evokes The Exterminator for some reason. Anyway, I've got a lot to do, so this box set I massively recommend. There's many versions of it you can get. Some with just the CD, some with the CD and the DVD, and you get vinyl as well. So I urge you to get this. It is phenomenal. And Ashradine, thank you so much. I don't think you knew when you sent that to me, and he sent it to me out the blue. It just arrived. I was like, what the hell is this? But when I found out he'd sent it, I was like, I'm doing this thing for Christopher Young, for Nosferatu, another modern guy, modern composer, modern musician that's created a score from a film from the 1920s, a silent horror movie from the 1920s from Germany, and you just sent me this. It was like, are you kidding me? Right, folks, I'm gonna somnambulate my ass out of here right now and finish off this bottle of whiskey. So, sweet dreams, y'all.